you ready, kids?
Hello, it's Employee a Million, and welcome back to SpongeComs. Today's episode is Season 3, Episode 19, or Episode 59 overall, The Sponge Who Could Fly, which originally aired on Nickelodeon on March 21st, 2003. Gosh, I can't believe we're here, right? The penultimate Season 3 episode, thus meaning the penultimate episode before I have to get along to the SpongeBob movie, the first one anyway. And something tells me this episode was supposed to be the very last in some sense, but I can't completely verify that in any way. But I've got very mixed feelings on this episode, mostly not the most positive, but the good news is you won't hear me complain about that for most of it because I have so much trivia and just information to share about this episode just in case you actually use these commentaries the way they're supposed to, just watching along with the episode. So, the big gimmick with this special is that it was hyped up as a lost episode, even though, there were plenty of other Season 3 episodes that had left to air, so it's not like this was the only SpongeBob episode left to air or to be made. Like, you still got a fair bit of SpongeBob. There wasn't really hype for this episode in that way, just hype for it as a new SpongeBob episode. Like, I doubt anyone really bought the belief that this was some sort of long-lost older episode or something. But it did pretty well in the ratings regardless. This is the highest viewed pre-movie episode, getting about 7.64 million viewers on its premiere, which wouldn't be beaten until Have You Seen the Snail in 2005. There were a few Season 4, 5, and 6 specials that were able to, take it over, but I still think 7.6 million viewers just 4 years in is an incredible achievement. So, and plus, Season 3, I did the math, and it is the season with the highest average ratings per premiere, averaging at around 4.6 million. Hype for these episodes was real. Hype for SpongeBob in general was real around 2002, 2003, 2004, which is why even though people knew that SpongeBob as they knew it, this run, Season 1, 2, and 3, was coming to an end, there was still a lot of anticipation for new episodes, which is probably why, it was pretty convenient that this had a theme of discovery to it. But even then, it is kind of impressive that there was any hype for this episode when it was released a couple weeks early on VHS and DVD. On DVD, on the Lost at Sea set, and on VHS, literally as The Sponge Who Could Fly. People were able to get it on video before they were able to watch the lost episode, which says that it's been found a week ago, even though the DVD's been out for more than a week. I don't know what's up with that. Why is Nickelodeon filled with monkeys in the scheduling office? I guess a part of this episode's status, its gimmick, is kind of prophetic because there's always something from SpongeBob's past to uncover, like a commercial or music video. SpongeBob is no stranger to lost media because you've always got something like that Matrix parody, that All the Small Things thing that aired on MTV, I think, and that Got Milk commercial. Just, there's always something from the past to find with SpongeBob, so I guess this episode really stuck with people, made people really want to preserve the past, and I guess that's a positive thing about it. And probably the funniest thing about these patchy segments, and that's not really saying much, is the cameos from SpongeBob staff. I think that this is Steven Hillenburg's only on-screen appearance in the entire show, aside from the mouth in the intro, as this miner giving Patchy the tape. Doesn't make too much sense. I don't know why he's in this case, but I don't know, it's nice to see him, even though he kind of disproves Patchy's whole point of having lost it. And you also see, who was it? Kent Osborne as the clown on the TV near the very end when Patchy's accidentally channel surfing. And he would continue to stay with the show for a few more years. And speaking of having like one last hurrah in a sense, this little upcoming walk cycle, which has always been my favorite part of the episode, is done by Mark O'Hare, and it is his final credit on the show, like major on-screen credit. He's done a few more things, like he worked on the movie, he worked on that 4D ride, but this is his last major credit as the storyboarder for this cheap walk cycle sequence, which kind of backfires because it's designed to be terrible and pointless and put Patchy off of SpongeBob. The only reason that they included this little jingle is because it was something that was really cheesy and annoying to the like people in charge, and they just wanted somewhere to put it, which is kind of funny. But it was eventually included on the Yellow Album CD, so to everyone's leisure, this thing goes. And aside from these Patchy segments just not being super duper funny, there are also little things about it that don't make too much sense and just kind of distract me. Like, how come this is the quote unquote episode that ruins SpongeBob for Patchy? Because maybe it's just because it's backfiring and I'm enjoying it, but it doesn't make too much sense these days because there are so many worse episodes than cheap walk cycles. Patchy, you've got a lot to quote-unquote look forward to in the future, so don't know what this little tantrum's all about in hindsight. I mean, I'd be happy to just get a little bit of lost media from SpongeBob. And a funny thing about this little sequence of Patchy quote-unquote getting rid of all his old SpongeBob toys and bed sheets is that most of the toys have this sort of bootleg design with bigger eyes and a bow tie instead of just a normal straight down tie. And that's because it was likely them having to avoid FCC breaches about showing merchandise in a show. But I don't exactly know why they cut a little bit of Patchy pulling off a SpongeBob plaster. Maybe because they just couldn't make a plaster in time, I don't know. The point is, this episode has definitely got off to a very weird start. We're already about a third of the way through it, and we've only just now got to SpongeBob's dilemma, which is that he wants to fly with the jellyfish. And I can see why this was intended to be one of the last episodes people saw of this original run, because SpongeBob is a very simple creature. I mean, he's a sponge after all. And SpongeBob, everything he wants in life he has. He has a job, he has a house, he has an education. But just for this one episode, he has a dream that he can't easily work out and find a solution to. And that is to fly with the jellyfish. Something totally fantastical that he can't easily accomplish. So I guess that's why they made it into this little musical event. None of the ads said that this was going to be a musical, but it was. It's got 3 songs. It counts. And I really do like how in these early seasons, when they do whip out a nice little ditty, it is very big and extravagant, like the Whip Pants song and the Girl Is Not a Home. Things like I Would Fly So Very High are in that vein, and even the ending song, even though it's more bittersweet, it's in that vein. And there are a few neat little callbacks in this thing, like SpongeBob consulting his memories of his grandfather again, and you get the saucy clip and the football from Your Shoes Untied on the TV at the end. There's also a mild call forward with the mariachi band, which again was used in the movie. It's the same big extravagant ending there for a certain scene. So yeah, I guess there was supposed to be a volcano at some point in the original idea for this episode because on the storyboard it's called Volcano Pants, which, I mean, maybe it was for secrecy. Maybe a volcano was supposed to be a bigger part of the story. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Thunderpants was already taken. So, I guess a big reason why this episode usually slips my mind and I don't like to think about it is that it's a oddly bitter way to like bow out, at least for the old specials, because it's an episode all about SpongeBob wanting to fly and only Patrick vaguely believing in him, everyone else just kind of treats him like a village idiot for wanting to fly. Which, I mean, fair enough, but then they get really resentful towards SpongeBob for it for some reason. And it's like, I don't know, that's enough, but then they just ungratefully ruin his life, and that's kind of a joke, but it's also kind of the story, and it's not that fun when, it's a double-length episode, but you're already spending nearly half of it on Patchy, so it's just a little longer and a little more boring, just without a good, payoff. A bittersweet payoff, but still not the funniest thing they could have gone for or anything. I'll get into a bit more about what I think of the better things about that ending in a bit. But, yeah, not the biggest Sponge You Could Fly defender, but I don't think it's the worst of the pre-movie era. It's definitely not the worst of the series. It's got a few funny bits. It's got a nice idea. It's got certain scenes that have a pleasant atmosphere, like that opening song number. And I think that the animation and the designs are pretty nice in this particular episode. I feel like for wanting to go out with a bang, I don't know, I guess they just sort of made things a little smoother, made SpongeBob's eyes a bit bigger. Just did little things to leave a strong last impression, even though I still don't know if this was meant to be the season finale or not. Probably not. There were a few little edits to the VHS and DVD releases to, make it a bit less obvious that it's supposed to be a TV show. They cut a little line between the commercial breaks, which they do for every special on those old DVD releases. And despite my thoughts on it, and other people's thoughts on it, sometimes people like it, sometimes people don't, I feel like we're going through another rise, but still, thoughts on it have been all over the place over the years. It's a pretty popular episode internally, it seems. It was featured on the Absorbing Favorites DVD in 2005, and I don't know what kind of measure of favorites they were going by, but it was technically the most popular episode in terms of ratings at the time that DVD was made, so I guess there's that. And it is kind of astounding that this episode got a whole musical based around it, which premiered in Singapore in 2007, then toured Europe and starting in 2009. And funnily enough, that production in Europe, specifically in the UK and Ireland in early 2009, I believe is the last piece of SpongeBob media to use the original logo. Around 2008, they were transitioning out of the old logo and into the new, bolder, less, charming one, in my opinion. So I guess that was a nice little send-off for that. This episode has also got this really iconic visual of SpongeBob having these massive balloon pants. This wouldn't work in real life, obviously, because obviously the air would just go straight out the ends. But, it's a cartoon, and we've got a nice new design for SpongeBob with a big old booty and a new lease on life to go to jellyfish fields and fly with the jellyfish. But because he's such a good Samaritan, he can't help himself from helping others. And I don't know, I feel like this direction in the episode is fairly disappointing because you've got SpongeBob fulfilling his dream in a sense, but then he has to just sort of help his friends out, then help other people out, then just sort of it's a conflict, but I don't really feel like it's a very fun conflict because then they just end the whole episode with a gag about how SpongeBob didn't really learn anything substantial about friendship from all this. And honestly, I think a big reason why this episode's tone is so weird, like it's got this very classical feel in terms of the setup of SpongeBob wanting to fly into the air, even though he's been able to float in other episodes, is because, well, you've got a plane, you've got that shot of the plane, and SpongeBob is treated as crazy by the others just for wanting to find a way to lift himself up into the air. And even though, it's just not the most reasonable for them to feel that way, especially since SpongeBob didn't really do anything wrong to them. In fact, he's done nothing but help them in this ending. As a matter of fact, the only person who has any sort of like bone to pick with him is this incarnation of Old Man Jenkins with his really repetitive and monotonous catchphrase about flying machines. And I believe this is one of the only times they use this iteration of Old Man Jenkins. It's just a catch-all name for old people in this show, but they attached it to a certain character in the later seasons. But yeah, that's what it adds to SpongeBob lore. It adds, a new level of popularity. It adds, probably my least favorite patchy segments of the pre-movie era. It adds a musical, which I've heard a few songs from, but those songs are terrible. It just makes me appreciate the songs in this one a little more. And yeah, that's the sponge who could fly, but if this is the end of the old SpongeBob, if this was meant to be the finale of the pre-movie era and putting SpongeBob Meets the Strangler and Pranks a Lot later was some sort of accident, I don't know if it makes for a bad finale. I certainly don't like it as an episode, at least the Sponge Who Could Fly segment. I don't think it's the best episode, but I do think that it makes for a fine finale. I think those are different things because you've got sort of a new thing for SpongeBob to discover about himself, that he wants to do something, but he can't do it because of certain things about how people treat him. It would have worked better if they leaned into the older idea from Stephen Ellenberg's Pitch Bible that he was a total goofball, and that's why people don't like him. Even though, I don't know, he isn't depicted as being too unreasonable. But yeah, I think if you let on that SpongeBob deserved some of this, that it would work a little more. I would ironically care a bit more about him. I'd ironically sympathize with the people of Bikini Bottom in this particular episode instead of just see them as an angry mob. I also think it wouldn't have made a bad finale because you've got this little bookend of SpongeBob losing his pants and, them making a little burial for his square pants, which are half of the show's title and half the character's name. And you've got this visual of him flying around on the jellyfish in his underwear, which is cheesy and weird, but one of the earliest episodes was about him singing a song with ripped pants, so, it's not too original. It feels like a bookend, I'm saying. And then you've got the last shot of him going back into his house without his pants on, when you've also got the intro, which is likely the first thing a lot of kids ever saw of SpongeBob, was that shot of him coming out of his pineapple and Hans coming to put his pants on. So you've got that sort of start and this end of SpongeBob losing his pants and just heading back into his house. Right after Patrick, who remains fairly likable throughout this, just sort of does a dumb, weird thing of being able to fly, which I like that joke. Can't say this is the funniest episode for me personally, but it's got a few little bits and bobs like that. I feel like I'm a bit torn on SpongeBob realizing that this thing doesn't have a moral, because I feel like that was just the writers figuring that out at the last second. But yeah, it's alright. I mean, the episode itself isn't the most alright in my book, just because of how, sort of unhappy it is, especially with this last little patchy segment where he seems to have lost the episode forever. Then the mariachi band comes in and the French narrator tells me to get lost. And come on, SpongeBob writers, don't be mean to me. I don't want to be told to get lost. But I don't know. I feel like this is one of the weirdest season 3 episodes to me personally. Like, I definitely do see why some people would think it's a good episode of not really one of the best. But I don't know, the problems are just too major for me personally. Even if they are trying to, give a nice little story about SpongeBob wanting something and realizing that he wanted something else or something. I don't know, it's a bit too odd for me. But yeah, I mean, at least the mariachi band, it's weird, but at least it's kind of a nice song to listen to. I mean, you've got the famous chorus there, but you've got that nice little solo at the very end. You can tell I've run out of notes, can't you? So, yeah, Sponge Who Could Fly. It wasn't lost, it wasn't... I will say, the walk cycle got more laughs out of me than the episode that came from it, so at least it's got the walk cycle. I'm trying to make lemonade out of lemons there. I always think at least it's the one with the walk cycle. Hopefully that's a positive enough way to end this. And that was The Sponge Who Could Fly. My question time for you last time was, what was your ideal finale? Dash L Rose says, it's kind of hard to pick a good finale for this show, but I'd have to say a good finale episode would be in Season 5, Pest of the West, just because Season 5 was the last season with a lot of really good episodes before the show really went downhill. Bryce Fawn 2001 says, for me, it would have to be a three-way tie between SpongeBob Meets the Strangler, Best Day Ever, and the Big Birthday Blowout special from Season 12. Balan Wonderland reviews, best episode for finale, I think SpongeBob Big Birthday Blowout, and Snake Man, SpongeBob Big Birthday Blowout, or Hello Bikini Bottom. Those are some decent choices. Question time this time. What's your favorite musical episode? As in, not just an episode with one good song, an episode with multiple songs, 2 or more, possibly even 3 or more, depending on your definition, where it's just banger after banger of songs, because I feel like The Sponge Who Could Fly is one of the consistently better written episodes in terms of musical numbers, but I can't be too sure. I'll need to give some other episodes a listen. But join me on the actual 20th anniversary of The Sponge Who Could Fly on March 21st, where I talk about the actual season finale for Season 3, SpongeBob Meets the Strangler, and Pranks-A-Lot. Goodbye for now.